Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Healing Lounge. Today, we have a special guest. We have Michael Baez, founder of Awaken Warrior Yoga and a dedicated yoga teacher with over 20 years of experience in both yoga and martial arts. From earning his second degree black belt in New York to opening one of the first yoga studios in the Bronx, Michael's journey has blended the discipline of martial arts with the heart of the yoga philosophy. Since 2011, his Awaken Yoga teacher training has certified over 300 students worldwide, and his teachings combine breath, focus, flexibility, and deep personal growth. He's trained under yoga legend Sri Dharma Mitra, holds an ERYT 500, and has taught everywhere from Lululemon to yoga expos. And Michael is also a filmmaker. Michael, welcome to the Healing Lounge. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for being on here. And I am very curious about your journey and curious about, what led you to your present moment. So yes, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, sure. Well, first, I think I have to go back to the beginning where I was born and raised in New York. I grew up in the Queens and the Bronx, went back and forth between the two boroughs for quite some time, and then moved to California, which is where I'm living now. And I've been here 20 plus years, but in New York is where everything began. It's where I studied martial arts. It's where I became a second degree black belt. It's where I started learning how to write scripts and make movies. It's where I opened my yoga school, as you said, in the Bronx. Yeah, the heartbeat was definitely from New York, and I think I always feel like I'm no, no matter what, I'm still a New Yorker at heart. So that's through and through.
That's amazing. And what great accomplishments also. What drew you to the practice of yoga and what made you stick?
Well, yeah, no, yoga is amazing. I started with martial arts, as I said, and I studied and taught for 10 years. I was in New York, and I was introduced to my dad. It was the 70s, Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, that was my childhood, was watching Bruce Lee on the screen and just being so in awe of him. And my dad was studying martial arts, and many of my family members as well. So my dad, at probably when I was like 4 or 5 years old, would like teach me how to stretch and like lift my leg up. I have pictures of him like lifting my leg all the way up, getting my flexibility and teaching me like the foundation, the basics. So I always had that interest and that desire in martial arts from him. And then as I got older, when I was about maybe 13 or so, my mom actually enrolled myself and my brother into the local Boys Club, which is like a community center type establishment in New York. I'm pretty sure they've got to be nationwide, but in New York, it's very popular. It's like the YMCA and there's the Boys Club. And so my mom enrolled us, just trying to keep us off the streets and keep us, on the straight path. And thank God she did, because that was probably one of the best decisions. From 13 to 23, that's all I did was martial arts. I started competing in my second week after school. I won my first trophy in just 2 weeks of training, and I was hooked. After that, I was like, okay, I want to do this. I was all in. I was a very shy kid, didn't play sports, was very introverted. And then as I discovered my voice in martial arts, literally, because every time we punch and we kicked, we would give our little, they call it the ki, where you get that yell, that martial art yell, that classic yell. And I started to find my voice. I started to become more confident, more sure of myself. And then started, like I said, just doing tournaments. And tournaments was a big game changer because it really showed me that like it's me, it's just me in the ring with my opponent, or me doing the forms. We call them katas, Kata, katas, which is like a synchronized dance we just do by yourself, and you're judged by your skill, you're judged by your technique, your presentation. So I did a lot of that as well, and that really showed me like, okay, I can do this, and I became obsessed with it. I went all into the martial arts like head first.
That's amazing. Yes, when it comes to martial arts, I'm pretty sure many have the notion of, oh yeah, it's just about, throwing punches or throwing kicks, but there's more to it, isn't there?
Yeah, so much more. It's what I love, as I said, for a young teenager in New York, it really gave me so much. It gave me my confidence, as I said, but also really put me in a community, with other fellow teens and young. My teachers were young. I don't know how old they were at the time, but they were older than me, but they were young for the time. And just to be part of that community at the boys' club, and then eventually the other instructor had a school at the YMCA, so we would go back and forth between the two locations, and I got a chance to just go from Queens to Brooklyn, and just going from borough to borough. It's such an interesting experience. So that really started to expand me beyond my neighborhood, and I would say that definitely a huge game changer for me. It really had me become who I am today. Was the martial arts. But then after about maybe 2 years or so, 2.5 years at that particular school, it was a more of a traditional Japanese style, from Okinawa, to be more specific. It was an Okinawa style of martial arts. I discovered another school in the Bronx, and that's where I actually got my black belt. So I got up to brown belt with one school, and then I left that school and then started studying at another school, and then I got my black belt at that school. And that one definitely was another life-changing experience, because at that school, it was that way ahead of its time. We're talking about like maybe like the 90s to the early 90s, and they were doing things I had never seen in martial arts. In the traditional martial arts, you wear the white uniform. They call it a gi. So, we always had the white gi, and that was it. At this school, they had red, they had stars and stripes, they had all these different colors, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then, the floor was carpeted, a red carpet, and a gigantic American flag on the front of the studio, and they were blasting hip hop music, and I was like, whoa, this is nothing like I've ever experienced before. And it was really, really amazing school. And that's where I studied and continued and became an instructor. Got my second degree black belt with Jerry Fontanez, and then his partner instructor was Tony Morrison. So between the two of those guys, I owe a lot to them. They really helped me to become a much better teacher, a better fighter. But everything really stems from the martial arts.
That's great. What a foundation to have. And, getting all of that, the training, the discipline, do you find it beneficial to get into at a young age?
Oh, absolutely. I highly recommend it. I definitely recommend any child, women, anybody should do martial arts. It's usually men. And nowadays, I think it's become more popular where it's kids also. Most martial arts schools have a pretty big child student body. But at the time, and that's why there was such a gap from the time that my dad started to teach me the basics at like maybe 3, 4, 5 years old till I was maybe 13, when my mom actually enrolled me into a school. So that gap of time was because at the time it wasn't really for kids. It was mostly for adults. And my dad had this belief, because of what he was seeing at his school, was it was mostly for men. So he always said, when I get older. But my mom, being very smart, said, okay, I'm gonna put him in at 13, which I think is a great age, because that's the age where you're going into middle school, you're going into high school, and many of my friends were experimenting, getting in trouble, just going down the wrong path. So I think it was probably the best decision my mom did, to put myself and my younger brother into that school, because it really kept us, with a goal. We had a disciplined schedule. We were always in classes. We were competing on the weekends in tournaments. So there was no time for fooling around. There was no time for getting into trouble. And the philosophy of the martial arts is, taking care of your body, not only developing it in terms of your strength, your power, your flexibility, but maintaining, a clear mind. So you can do that if you're messing around, in the streets, and doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing as a teenager.
Yes, that really helps pretty much get your mind focused, and I love that it helps you to accomplish goals and goal setting. That's very
Yes, yes,
important.
exactly. I think what's great about it is because it's belt oriented, so you get your white belt, and then soon after that, within 2 weeks, as I mentioned, when I won the tournament, I got my yellow belt, and then they skipped me. I skipped orange, went right to blue, because I was progressing so quickly, so that those belts are milestones. They really set goals. You achieve one belt, you're already looking for the next one. What do you have to do? What do you have to learn to take your test for the next one? Ultimately, with the black belt being the end goal, and then even there you have degrees, and I was able to get to second degree. So I think it's brilliantly designed for children, right? They have small goals, and then ultimately the black belt being the bigger goal.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and when it comes to martial arts and how you're passionate about it, how did you get into or transition into yoga? Where did that introduction come in, and what was your first thought when you got into it?
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting because I discovered yoga when I moved to California. So I was in martial arts from 13 to 23, 10 years, perfect time to keep me, on the straight path, as I said. But then I always had the film bug. I always, when I was a child, when I was probably around 8 years old or so, I wanted to be an actor. There was a show on air. I don't know how old you are, but there's a show called Different Strokes, and I grew up watching Different Strokes. And Gary Coleman, who was a young actor, he had a form of I want to say a sickness or disease, but he couldn't grow. He was always going to maintain that size, so he always looked like a kid, even though he was an older, probably a teenager at the time. But he always looked like a child, so he wouldn't grow. So that inspired me because I was like, oh, he's a kid. I'm a kid. I want to be on TV, and then the light bulb moment of like, oh, you can do this for a profession. I want to be an actor. And that was a really big aha moment. And my mom being incredibly supportive, she enrolled me in, local classes and dance classes, singing classes, and would take me out of school and take me to auditions. And then I started to land student films for kids at NYU. I would do their films, and that really gave me the first hand look because I was, with an independent film, especially if you're in a school, it's a small crew, so it's probably maybe 4 or 5 people on crew. So I was really interacting directly with the director and the sound person and makeup and wardrobe, like it was just a small little clique. And that really it really inspired me to become an actor. And I kept doing a lot of films like that. But then at one point, someone, I guess a casting director or manager told my mom if he spoke Spanish fluently, he probably could get more opportunities and auditions. I was like, okay. So then we took a little time out and I went into middle school, and then I started taking classes in Spanish with that intention of like really learning the language. But I never went back. I just went into martial arts at 13 and then forgot about about becoming an actor. And then from like 13 to I don't know what age, maybe like my late 20s, maybe like 21, 22, early 20s. There was a movie called Carlito's Way with Al Pacino and Sean Penn, and Brian De Palma directed it. Very, very popular movie. That made me realize, okay, I want to be an actor again, because what happened was it was an open call audition, and I went, and I was an extra in the movie. If you look closely, you'll see me in the dance club scenes in the movie, and that's where the bug started. It got ignited again. I was like, okay, I want to get back in the entertainment industry, but the director, he's the one calling the shots, and it was Brian De Palma. I was like, I want to be that guy. So I said, forget about acting. I want to direct. And that's when I said, okay, I transitioned now into becoming a director as opposed to an actor. And then as soon after that, I was at a Tony Robbins seminar. One of the things that Tony Robbins does, if you're familiar with him, he's probably the best success coach on the planet, in my opinion. He has you do things that are like beyond your comfort zone, things that are like super scary, just to show you like what you're capable of doing. And one of the things that we had to do was climb a pole, almost probably double the size of a telephone pole. And you have a harness, you have a helmet, so you're safe. But it could be quite intimidating for the average person, especially if you're scared of heights. I wasn't, but I'm looking up at the pole going, oh my God, how am I going to do this? You climb the pole. But the trick is that once you get to the top and there's no platform, there's nothing to hold on to, somehow you have to figure out a way how to stand on top of the pole. There's nothing there, just your feet are, and then the pole is probably this big, so your feet are hanging off the edges. And then there's a trapeze, like maybe 10 to 12 feet out. And with all your might, you have to jump off of the pole and grab onto the trapeze. And I did that. And I made a promise to myself that if I could do that, I could become a filmmaker. If I could climb this pole and jump onto that trapeze, because it seems impossible. So I did it. I grabbed the trapeze. They brought me down safely, and in my mind, I was a filmmaker. And I had no film experience. I didn't write, and I didn't write how to know how to write a script. I never did a movie in my life. I was never, a director. Then I started to research and found the New York Film Academy, and I was very fortunate because they offered a scholarship. So I applied for the scholarship. I got it. I went to their beginning class or their advanced class, and I started making movies. And then that was like a really, really powerful experience, because it really, showed me that, you can achieve something, not only with a black belt and the martial arts with the belts, as I said, but to set a bigger goal outside of that, of like achieving something, which I did, in becoming a filmmaker. And then I started doing commercials and directing and producing short films and editing, and that was it. So that's what made me decide to come to California. And then California is where I discovered yoga. So it's kind of a long answer, sorry, but I have to tell you the whole steps to how I got here.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect answer. Yeah, I
Oh,
love
thank
it.
you.
I wanna learn more about the film industry and
Yeah,
dive in a little
yeah.
bit more in there.
No, it was
Yeah.
wonderful, and I was so grateful because once I finished the film academy, the second course, I did their introductory course where I had to teach, where I had to create a 10-minute short film in black and white, and this was so great about the school, and it's changed a lot now. Now it's become a huge global accredited school, but at the time it was only one location in New York City in Union Square, and they taught you how to shoot and edit on film, and you're editing on the cameras, I mean, on a big machine. You're cutting the film with a little razor blade and taping it together, like old school. The way they did it in the days is how we learned. And I think I was probably one of the last generations to do it of that school, because I think after that they switched to digital and everything editing on computers. But it was really a wonderful experience. And then I went to their advanced course, and we were supposed to make a 20-minute color sound film. The first one was 10-minute black and white, no sound. And then the second course was 20-minute color. But I had realized that if I timed it out properly, because I realized that, we would work together with our classmates and teams. So Friday would come, and let's say, for example, we would shoot your film. And then Saturday morning, we would shoot my film. And then one of our other classmates, Saturday night, we would shoot their film. I noticed that by Sunday, we were done, and the equipment was just sitting there waiting for us to go back to school on Monday. And I was like, if I time this out right, and I go last, because with that program we had 1 week to shoot. I said, if I can be the last guy to shoot and no one's waiting for the equipment after me, I think instead of shooting a 20-minute film, I could shoot a feature film. That's what I did. I wrote a script for a 90-minute movie. I went last. Everyone shot their film. I told the guy who loaned us the gear, because it was part of the school, so we'd have to rent it. It was part of the tuition. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna shoot this week, but can I hold it one more week?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem. No one's after you. Hold it for one more week." And then week two came, and I went back to school again. I said, "Can I hold it for one more week?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem." So I had the film equipment for 3 weeks. And then the crazy thing is that, we were in school learning how to shoot, how to light, how to edit. I trained my own little side team of wannabe filmmakers. I trained them how to do those things, and they were my crew. So it wasn't even my classmates, because they were busy working on their projects. So I trained a whole side crew. I trained them how to use the equipment that I got from school, and we shot a 90-minute movie in 3 weeks, and it was incredible. It really showed me what was possible, and then because of that, within the karate world, people knew me. A buddy of mine, he had a karate school, and he knew I went to film school. He says, "Hey, Michael, do you think you could shoot a TV commercial for me?" Because he had a martial arts school. He went to advertise on TV. I was like, "Yeah, I just shot a 90-minute movie. Shooting a 30-second commercial has got to be a piece of cake." I shot his commercial, and then the cable provider at the time, it was called Cablevision in New York. The cable provider saw my work, and then they brought me in as a freelancer, and I worked with them for 20 years because of that one commercial, for Hector Delgado Karate. I worked for 20 years with Cablevision, and I probably also about 200 to 300 TV commercials over the course of 20 years. And that was boot camp. That was like, okay, you learn how to use the equipment in school, but learning how to like apply it in life and go and meet clients and negotiate and find out how to market their business. I became a marketer and a commercial director from that. So I'm really grateful for like following my journey and trusting my intuition and taking those, literally a leap of faith. Great metaphor, taking that leap of faith, jumping off that pole and making the declaration to become a director, completely changed my life.
Definitely a leap of faith. Wow, what a great story. And I'm curious, what was the
Yeah,
90-minute video about?
yeah, yeah,
What was that
yeah.
first creation?
Yeah, yeah, which was wonderful is that growing up in New York, there's so many different neighborhoods and so many different cultures. And, my mom and my dad and my grandparents, they grew up in an area in New York called Spanish Harlem. Everyone knows of Harlem. Harlem, they would refer to it at the time as Black Harlem, and then it was Spanish Harlem. So it's like the West Side and the East Side. So Spanish Harlem is where my grandparents lived, where my mom grew up, where my dad grew up. And that neighborhood had such an impact on me growing up at 6 years old, 7 years old. I would spend a lot of time with my grandparents. My parents would work, and I would stay with my grandparents as when before I was in school. And I just was just absorbing the community, it had such a rich culture, Puerto Rican culture, and the food and the music and the pride, and it really impacted me. So when I decided to write my first screenplay while I was in film school, I set it in that neighborhood. It was called Spanish Harlem was the name of the movie. And I just set it on the world of like these young guys who want to get into entertainment industry as singers and dancers, and how they embark on their journey. And then one of the it's like what was it, four guys as far as the characters. One of them meets a girl, falls in love, gets her pregnant, and then has to make the tough decision: do I pursue my career with my boys, or do I take the responsible path and become, a father and a great partner? So he decides to go that route and take care of his family, and he winds up having a daughter, and then she winds up becoming a famous singer. And so she kind of like relives his dream. She manifests the dream that he gave up for her. He sacrificed for her, and she winds up becoming a singer. So it was really, really nice story, and it was, it was ultra low budget. I think the whole budget was like maybe $30,000. And to shoot on film, in New York City, that's a huge accomplishment. I edited the movie myself, as I said, on the flatbed. It's called a flatbed, the machine. It was all friends and family, in the movie. It was great. It was a wonderful experience. It was a student film, so I didn't make it, to get distributed or nothing like that. But it was definitely a huge learning experience for me. Like, okay, you can do this. You can make a movie for a low budget, tell a great story, and get it from beginning to end. And that was my philosophy to this day.
Wow. What a journey
Yeah,
so far.
that's just the
Yes.
film part.
And in your experience with martial arts, how did that impact your movie career as a film?
Tremendously, tremendously, because my first short film that I did when I was in film school, the 10-minute short film, it was a martial art film. Of course, I had to implement, because I had access to a martial arts school. I had my fellow karate buddies there, so I was able to put them in there. My karate instructor, he's in it. He plays a hitman. His brother's in it, so I really use like everyone I knew from the karate world. They're my cast, and because they did martial arts, we had like cool fights and stunts, so it was really, really cool. So that was the first thing. But I think that, within studying the martial arts gives you, especially becoming a teacher gives you the confidence to speak in front of people. When you're teaching a class of, 10, 15, 20 people, you have to project, you have to use your voice, you have to communicate, you have to keep the energy high, you have to bring the energy down. Like, I really understood the dynamics of working with a group of individuals. And I think that those lessons transferred over to film sets as a director, as a producer, so perfectly. But even as a yoga teacher, same thing. The way I teach in martial arts is exactly how I teach in yoga. It's just a different skill set and a different context of what we're teaching as far as the sequences. But in terms of me as an instructor, I learned how to teach, when I was, I think, 16 years old, thank God. And to this day, at my age now, I'm still teaching, and I still understand, I'm drawing from all those years of teaching martial arts into teaching yoga now.
That's amazing. Yes, and you mentioned earlier that you moved from New York, from the Bronx
Yeah. Yeah.
to
To
LA,
California.
to
Yeah.
California. And how was that transition? And yeah, what happened in California?
Well, I'll tell you one of the things that sparked me to move, because I had been, once I made my first film and I was doing the commercials. Now I started to travel to California, because the movie industry was here, and there was an event, a big like filmmaker conference specifically for Latinos called Latin Heat, and a buddy of mine in New York told me about it. So then I came to California. I had been there before for a martial art tournament, but now I was going back now as a filmmaker, and I went to this convention and then met, other filmmakers, met actors, met producers, and that made me expand my mind and go, okay, this is where I have to be. So that I already started to think that way, like I really need to get myself over to California. And this was around probably from like 1997 to like maybe 2000, 2001. I was going back and forth between New York and California, just kind of like, building those relationships that I had established, kind of like checking out the area, meeting people, started to try to pitch my scripts to producers, things like that. So there was a few years of just kind of like feeling it out. But an interesting experience happened. I wound up getting a full-time job for this company called Xerox, which is the copy company, right? So I wound up getting a full-time job for them after I stopped teaching martial arts to get more into film, but I needed to still make money, obviously. So I get hired by this company called Xerox, and I'm making copies and fixing copy machines, and it was a great job because I had steady paycheck, I had benefits, I had all those luxuries, but inside I was not happy. I was like, this isn't what I want to do. Like it's great to pay the bills, but I want to be a filmmaker. Like this, I'm not feeling it. So I was really debating leaving the job and going after full-time as a filmmaker. And I had no idea how to go about that. But I had this one story. I wrote a script. So I say I'm gonna shoot this movie. So sure enough, I quit my job and I went all in. I went all in with that particular project. And this is so bizarre. This goes to show you, and I think I shared with you when I first met at the event with Michelle. Thank God that I did that. Thank God that I listened to that inner voice and I quit that job to pursue my dream. Because exactly 1 year later, the Twin Towers collapsed, the World Trade Center. And that's where I was working. I was working in the World Trade Center, in the Twin Towers on the hundred and something floor. I don't remember, such a long time ago. And I would have had to have been there that morning because we had to be at work, I think at like 8:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So in me the job, pursuing my filmmaking dream, my passion, it wasn't even like a guaranteed job waiting for me. It was just like, again, another leap of faith. I did so, and I'm so grateful because then, the towers collapsed, and that was it. It was such a horrible, horrible experience, and a huge, huge loss in New York for many people. But it really, really opened my eyes and to go, okay, if you're serious about this, you got to go all in. So then a year later, at the time I was in a relationship with my son's mom. We're not together anymore, but we're still best friends. And we decided now's a better time. The commercial business has stopped. I wasn't doing any commercials because the whole economy got disrupted. New York was in this really weird space, kind of like COVID was. Like where everyone was like unsure, like what the heck's going on. That's where we were in New York. So we packed our bags and came to LA, and I said, okay, I'm just gonna go after the dream. I'm gonna become a filmmaker. And then I started to, mingle and make friends and make connections and things like that. But something kept pulling me back to New York. I just found myself going right back to New York for commercials, and I started to do a lot of more TV commercials. Again, the commercial business started to pick up again. So I would fly from California to New York. I did this almost multiple times a month, sometimes once or twice a month, but it was just that was my life for a good part of it. But it was here in California where I took my first yoga class. A good friend of mine, her name was Onawa Rodriguez. She invited me. She said, "Hey, you want to take a yoga class?" And I was like, "All right, cool." I never done it before. I was curious about it, but I never done it. And it was in somebody's living room. It wasn't even a yoga studio. It was in somebody's house. And we got there a little bit late, so the place was packed. And I think I was like by the door, the doorway. It was like very enough space for me to even lay out my mat. But within 10 minutes of that class, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. I love this. I was hooked, because I had been in California for a little while and I was like, okay, I want to keep with the physical activity, but I don't want to go back into martial arts as a teacher or competing in tournaments. I don't want to start all over with a white belt because I was already a second degree black belt. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So yoga became the perfect substitute, and I feel that yoga had everything that the martial arts offered in terms of like flexibility, coordination, focus, concentration, all that thing, everything but the ego. We're martial arts because we were so driven on like competing in tournaments and being the best. I was very egocentric. Where with yoga, it was like, no, let go of the ego. And we have a great phrase. I'm sure you heard of it. Ego, edging God out. And with ego, we're pushing the divine away and making it really about ourselves. And with yoga, it really was like, no, let go of the ego and really turn within. Connect to a higher power and watch how your life transforms. And mine did. As I said, I became hooked, became obsessed with yoga, went back to another Tony Robbins seminar, climbed the pole again, jumped off, grabbed the trapeze, and I had this time what I call a divine intervention, a divine inspiration, I call it. And I decided I want to open a yoga school. So I went back to New York and opened up a yoga school in the Bronx. Yeah, so it's wild. It's just looking at my pattern, my life. I'm constantly between New York and LA. So I just had to surrender, like, okay, I'm bi-coastal. I have to surrender to like yoga and film. And that's why we chose to incorporate, if you see the yin and yang logo in the logo for the business, Awaken Warrior, is because of that, because of the dualities and because of the balance, how you need one and the other. And I think to me, this could be New York and LA. This could be male, female. This could be light, dark, hot, cold, strong, soft. It could be so many different things. But that was a big revelation for me, which is you have to have both. You can't have one or the other. You got to just surrender to both.
Absolutely. Wow, what a journey. Yes, and going back and forth from New York to LA.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
The traveling, so exciting.
Thank
And
you.
as far as us starting the yoga studio, uh,
Yeah,
there in the Bronx, did you have any of your martial arts students or martial arts
yeah,
you know, uh, collective come over and
yeah.
do some yoga with you?
Yeah, actually, I one of my buddies from the martial art world who was also a black belt with us, and we actually went on a fighting team at one point together. We would compete representing the school where we were at with Jerry Fontanez. His name was Joe Rivera, and Joe Rivera and his wife at the time, who passed away unfortunately, God rest her soul, Jessica Fuentes. We all had nicknames. My nickname was Flex. His was Mighty Joe, and hers was China Doll. So I went back to New York after I jumped the pole with Tony Robbins, and I said, "Hey guys, what do you think about opening a yoga school?" Because they own the martial arts school, and they had a building where upstairs was martial arts, and then downstairs was this empty space. I said, "Hey, what about putting a yoga school there?" And they were like on it. They were like, "Yeah, that's a great idea," because we felt like there was no yoga school in the immediate area where we were in the Bronx. And this was like in 19 no the 2000 like 2008 2009 around that time. And though that doesn't seem that long ago. At the time, believe it or not, a lot of people didn't even know what yoga was. They would come into the school and go, "What's yoga?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So we're really introducing yoga to a new community. People were trying it for the very first time, and it made such an impact. It really put a lot of great energy into that community. We were in Pelham Bay Park, and I actually wound up licensing the name of the yoga school that I trained and got certified at. It was called Bamboo Moves. So I was studying at Bamboo Moves in Forest Hills, Queens, and then we opened up Bamboo Moves in the Bronx and in Pelham Bay Park, and it was such a wonderful experience. I was physically involved in the day-to-day for 4 years with that studio. That's where Awaken Warrior was born, was from that studio. It's where many of my friendships to this day I still have, with some of those students from there have become very close friends of mine. And it was really providing a lot of healing in the community. Again, this is a community that didn't even know what yoga was, and they were trying it for the first time. One of my best friends, her name is Denise, she had came to us because she had suffered a really horrible tragedy, a loss in her family, and when she was depressed and trying to find healing and going to therapy, and nothing was working. And then her best friend Jody enrolled her in the school, and next thing you know, they both became students. And then Denise found healing from yoga, with the philosophy of yoga. And that's a beautiful thing, is that it's not just a physical. Everyone always thinks that yoga is the poses, and that's only 1/8 of the equation. We say that the other 7 limbs, and the metaphor is from this philosophy called the 8 limbs of yoga. Like a tree, there's not just one branch on a tree. There's a whole bunch of branches. So the other 7 limbs has really, really powerful philosophy, spirituality, meditation, all these other things that yoga offers you is found within the other 7 limbs. So Denise was able to find healing through the philosophy, through the community. She did a teacher training with us at the studio, and changed her life. She's still teaching to this day, and she was able to find that peace. Losing a family member, you can't, that doesn't just go away, but she was able to find peace with it, from a lot of the philosophy and just the camaraderie and what the studio was providing for the community. And she became an instructor there at the studio. She also was in the film business, so I would have her do TV commercials with me. She would go and work with me on set. So it was really amazing. It was one of the best times of my life is working with that, those 4 years at that studio. And to this day, we still run yoga trainings. Awaken Warrior teacher training is the brand, and it's our company. And we teach, in New York, LA. We've run trainings in Florida. We've run trainings in Kentucky. We've had students all around the world, now with the digital age and being able to do Zooms and things like that. And we were doing this way before COVID and before Zoom. We already had an online course. So we have students from all around the world. So, you name a country, we probably have a student there.
That's incredible. What a great joy it must be to introduce such a practice and such a healing practice to a community that hasn't didn't experience that or didn't have access to it. And
Yeah.
all of these people that just receive so
Yeah.
much healing and grounding from it as well. That's
Yes,
incredible.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think of many students, we had one student who was facing a divorce, and she found healing through the training. We had one student whose fiance, took his own life, weeks before they were to get married. He battled depression and he made that horrible decision that really impacted not only her life but everyone around and obviously his. So we were able to help a lot of people find some form of healing. And I don't credit it to me. I don't credit it to the studio. I credit it 100% to yoga and to the divine. What yoga truly means, and what people mistake yoga to be, as I said, is the poses. But we say that yoga is union with the divine. That's one of the higher, there's many different definitions of yoga, what it means. But to me, that one really speaks the truth and really resonates with me, is that, unity with the divine, becoming one with it, and I think that when you understand that philosophy, then of course one can find healing, because, one of the principles that we teach is that separation from the divine is what causes suffering. So when you're not connected to a higher power, when you don't have a spiritual belief, it doesn't have to be yoga, it could be whatever it is, it could be church, it could be whatever. If you don't have any type of belief or connection with the higher power, then of course you're going to have a life of suffering, a life of pain and confusion, and like, oh, the life sucks, the government sucks, the economy sucks, right? You're just looking through these lenses of like, a victim mindset, and really feeling like, everything it doesn't matter, why should we recycle, throw your trash out in the street, who cares? Like you have that really jaded, bitter mindset, and I think that the beautiful thing about connecting with the divine is you see that we're all one, everything does matter, everything that I do has a ripple effect, in yoga we call it karma. And so yeah, so the teaching of yoga, even I always tell people, even if you don't want to be a yoga teacher, one should still do a teacher training, because it's the only place where you're going to get the deeper philosophy, spirituality lessons of yoga is in a teacher training. Unless like you go to India or you go to wherever and find a guru and like study with them and live with them, that's one way, of course. But for the more modern way, for people is to do a yoga training. And I can't recommend that enough.
That's incredible. Do you recommend who do you recommend yoga to? Just
Everybody, yeah, everybody. And it's so funny because a lot of people will think that they can't do yoga. This is probably like the number one excuse why we hear people say, "I can't do yoga." They say this, "I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible." It's like, no, you don't do yoga because you are flexible. You do yoga to become flexible. Right? And that's probably most of the world. Where people are tight, right? We're all at our desk, we're all our computers, we're on our phones, our neck is hunched over, our fingers, and we're feeling our wrists and our thumbs hurt. So what yoga does is it really has you move your entire body, from head to toe. In my class in particular, we work literally every single part of the body gets worked. The sequence is designed for everything to get stretched, everything to get challenged, for you to get stronger, to become more flexible. And that's the thing I love about yoga, is that it has a perfect balance, as I said, with the yin and yang of strength and flexibility. Where if you look at people who go to the gym, well, they may have big muscles, but they're so tight. They can't touch their toes. They can't bring their hands behind their back. And I see this many times. I taught at Crunch Fitness, not too far from where I live. And most men, particularly men, couldn't bring their hands behind their back. They couldn't interlace their fingers behind their back. They couldn't touch their toes. And you see women who have been doing yoga, for a couple of years, doing every pose I threw at them with no problem. So it had nothing to do with strength in terms of muscles. It had to do with strength in terms of like, can you hold your own body weight? Do you have the flexibility? So yeah, for sure, I recommend both martial arts just for like the confidence and being able to defend oneself in case, God forbid, you're in a situation, you get attacked or someone tries to do something horrible to you. And then yoga in terms of like just flexibility and awareness and spirituality, meditation, so many things. Yoga has so much more to offer than what most people believe it to be.
Yeah, thank you so much for elaborating on that too. And it seems like yoga can be more of a allowing you to do more mental breakthroughs, allowing you to
Yes, yes.
overcome certain challenges or belief systems. Do you find that to be true?
100% true. I believe yoga is the first form of personal development. Nowadays, self-help books and everyone's a life coach. Not to knock that industry, but like it's become saturated, right? You do a course and next thing you know, I'm a life coach. There's so many, which is beautiful, right? You're creating healing. Again, I'm not knocking it, but it's just become very, very popular, right? Some things become very trendy. And I think that what yoga is the first form of personal development, is the first form of life coaching. But, and the relationship between a yoga teacher or specifically a guru is a beautiful relationship. A guru is someone, and that's a word that I always say in my training that kind of gets twisted. People think that, they use that word nowadays, like, oh, he's a tech guru or she's a fashion guru. And it's like, no, no, no. A real guru is not that, right? They're not someone. I think a better word for what they're saying is like an expert. Oh, they're an expert in fashion or technology or whatever, marketing. A true guru is someone who takes you out of your darkness and shows you your light, or someone who takes you out of your ignorance and shows you your truth, right? And a fashion guru or tech guru is not doing that, right? A true guru does that for you. And a true guru, the teaching also is that we all have a guru within us, right? We have what we call that the intuition, inner voice. In the teachings of yoga, we say a portion of God resides within your heart. So we have to turn within and listen to that, our own intuition. As I said, had I not listened to my intuition and stayed at that job out of fear at the World Trade Center, I wouldn't be here, right? So because I listened to my intuition, I felt the calling to leave and to pursue a higher purpose of becoming a filmmaker. I listened, and thank God I did. So that's a very sacred teaching of yoga, is that you have to listen to your inner wisdom, and that's something my teacher would say often. I think in my training with Dharma Mitra. We're there, as people from all around the world, and he's 80. He just turned 86 years old this week, and he still teaches in New York City to this day. Just to show you how incredible he is, and he's still doing headstands and handstands and back bends at 86 years old. Most 80-year-olds, are walking with a cane. And then they're on the last legs of their life, and here he is doing all this amazing stuff. But one thing that we would be in the presence of Dharma in our training, and everyone would always have questions when they want to know the meaning of life and all this stuff, and after like the second or third question, we all got it. We got the answer to pretty much every question. This was his answer: use your inner intelligence, use your inner wisdom, use your inner intuition, right? And then we got, okay, we got to stop asking, right? Just turn within. He'll teach us the poses, he'll teach us the philosophy, of course, and that's what we're there for. But like these questions that we were asking him were questions that we had to find the answer for ourselves, right? He couldn't tell us, oh, Michael, be a filmmaker, or oh, Michael, no, forget about film, only teach yoga. That's a conversation I had to have with myself. I couldn't put it on him to make that decision for me. And I think that's what a lot of people do. And that's why, unfortunately, the guru student relationship gets a little bit tainted, because people become completely subservient to the guru and do whatever they say. And unfortunately, there's some bad people who've taken advantage of that. Not only say in the yoga world of the guru relationship, but like cults, people, oh yeah, give us all your money, turn your back on your family, never speak to them again, and let's go into the mountains and live in isolation. That's not the relationship that a true guru, because a true guru, at some point when they feel like you've learned all that you have to learn, they send you on your way. They're like, okay, now you can go. Now you can go back home. And that's what happened with Dharma. He had studied with his teacher in New York City. And then at some point it was time for him to leave the nest, and he left, and he didn't know where to go, but then he found his footing and he found his community, and then he became a legend unto himself. I think that's a much better representation of that word. It gets so overused in the wrong way in today's times, but that's the truth.
Yes, and it's very important to listen to your inner intuition.
Yes, always.
Always.
Always, right?
Absolutely.
Even like, I say this even with martial arts, particularly for women, you have an intuition that says, don't go into this parking lot by yourself, or have your key ready as you approach your car, like, because your intuition says that, hey, there's something can happen to me in this situation. I'm by myself walking the streets, I'm walking home by myself, or I get out the subway, or you go into the subway. Growing up in New York, man, you see it all. Riding the subways, like, you got to be on guard. You can't fall asleep on the train. Some horrible things have happened. Unfortunately, I won't repeat them now, but like really, really horrific things have happened on the subways and in the streets of New York. And I think that was our first lesson for me, to listen to your intuition, right? To listen to your that little voice that says, be awake, be alert, don't fall asleep. So these are things that I learned from martial arts that then later on were more clarified for me in yoga. But there were things more of like a self-defense technique, as opposed to like a more of a spiritual awakening technique. But it was the same thing, which is ultimately listen to your intuition and listen to that inner voice inside.
Yes, and Awaken Warrior Yoga. What created that name, or why
Yeah,
Awaken
thank you.
Warrior Yoga?
A great question. Great question. I debated with that for a while, and I think of the awakening, the first part of the world awakened, it's when we say when you have an awakening experience, you've been enlightened, or you think of like when you're sleeping and you wake up in the morning, right? It's that awakening moment. And when you have an enlightened moment, Dharma, my teacher calls it self-realization or self-actualization. Another word I chose is awakened. It's that. It's just you're awakened. You're open to the truth. And I believe that once you're awakened to the truth, you can't go back to sleep. You can't pretend. Once you know, you can't pretend you don't know. I've been vegetarian since I was 16 years old, and that was a great thing about the martial arts school that I was in. Is a lot of the instructors in the community were vegetarians, and as a child, I had asthma. I was always sick. I was in the hospital, in ER, taking inhalers, getting the breath nebulizer, pills, and I was like, this can't be natural. From my childhood to the time I was about 16 is when I decided to become vegetarian. I was like, this can't be it. Something's got to be wrong, and I didn't know what it was. And I had a conversation with somebody at the karate school who was very, very health conscious. Back in 1990 or whatever year it was, he knew what we all know now. Factory farming, the hormone injections of the animals, all these things that they're doing horrible. He knew this stuff, and he was talking to us about this in a 30-minute car ride going from the Bronx to Queens. I had asked him before we left the school. I said, "Hey, his nickname was Papa Joe. If you know the Smurfs, Papa Smurf. So since he was the wise one of the group, we called him Papa Joe. I said, "Hey, Papa Joe, I have asthma. What I do? He's like, do you eat meat? I was like, yes. Do you drink milk? Yes. He said, that's why. And he walked away. And I was like, what? Because in all my years of going to the doctor in the ER, not one doctor ever said, what's your diet like? Not one. It was always like, oh, take an inhaler, you need this pill, you need this. Not one said, what's your diet? Change your diet. And a 30-minute car ride, because then he drove me home from the Bronx to Queens. In 30 minutes, he hit me with all the facts. Everything that we all know now, he knew it back then. And I was like, I'll never eat meat again. And I stopped. I went, no pun intended, cold turkey. I stopped eating meat that night. The next morning, I didn't have breakfast. I didn't know what to eat. So I was walking to school. I was in junior high school, or high school, I remember it was, and I started to black out. I started to feel like just blocked. I was like, oh my God, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't eat breakfast because I was scared to eat food. So I was okay. I need to change something, And back then, there wasn't vegan and vegetarian options at your local supermarket, right? You had to go find a health food store, which is like this really tiny little store that was overpriced because it was like very rare. Nowadays, you have a section, a whole aisle for vegan and vegetarian options. Most restaurants have vegan and vegetarian options. And back then we did it. So it was much more difficult, and especially 16 years old in New York to become a vegetarian. So I became a pescatarian. I did have fish in the beginning, and then finally that was what I transitioned to, and then went back and forth between vegan and vegetarian. And even now I go back and forth between vegan and vegetarian. But I try my best. I do notice that when I'm vegetarian, which means I'm having fish or I'm having, dairy, I do find myself getting clogged, which is what was happening to me when I ate meat. I always had runny noses. I always had like teary eyes. I always had like a weird upset stomach, and it was from eating meat. So I changed my diet. And that's a principle of yoga in the martial arts, not knowing anything about veganism or vegetarianism. And I specifically did it for my own health reasons. It was for selfish reasons. But in yoga, with the teaching is that you can't reach true levels of enlightenment. You can't be fully awakened if you're causing harm to other creatures, right? If you're trying to be enlightened and be connected to divine, you can't be contributing to an industry that's killing animals brutally with no remorse, with no care in the world, like being just brutal. So the teaching is you won't reach enlightenment if you're causing suffering. And if you want to end your suffering, then you have to stop causing suffering for others, and that's a deep one, right? People go, oh shit, I don't know if I could do that. But it's steps, baby steps. I've been doing this for years, and I'm still going back and forth. So it's baby steps.
It's definitely a process.
Yeah.
Myself, I don't eat meat or
Yeah.
dairy. It
It
wasn't.
shows in your complexion, like your skin is glowing.
Thank you.
It definitely shows. You can tell when people are healthy. You look at most vegans and vegetarians, and people, weightlifters. Wow, you're skinny, you're weak, you can't do this, you can't do that. But you put that weightlifter, as I said, they can't reach their toes, they can't interlace their fingers behind their back, they could barely hold their own body weight in plank or chaturanga. So if you look at yogis, they're super strong, like real legit yogis, like masters, gurus. They're strong, they're flexible, they're wise, their skin glows like yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that compliment. Yeah, I worked really hard for it.
It's true.
And I gave up a lot of belief systems. But it's really interesting that, that yoga really embraces that philosophy of compassion, right?
Yes.
Compassion.
Compassion for living things. That's a principle. It's called ahimsa in the eight limbs of yoga. One of the principles is ahimsa, and ahimsa is compassion for all living things. And it can be selective, right? You can't be like, oh, I'll show compassion for my mom, my dad, my best friends, but that a-hole who cut me off, when I was driving to work or bumped me on the subway, no compassion for that person. Or, I'll show compassion for my cat or my dog, but pigs and chickens and turkeys, we can eat those. Like, what's the difference? And then it's other countries eat dogs, right? We're like, oh, how could they eat a dog? Well, how can you eat a chicken or a turkey? So it's like we can't be hypocritical when it comes to this stuff. You've got to be all in, and it's hard. Look, I'll be the first one to tell you, a mosquito lands on my arm, I'm swatting a mosquito, right? So it's like, technically, I shouldn't kill the mosquito, right? Compassion for all living creatures means mosquitoes too, but it's like, oh, do I really want to be scratching my whole trip or wherever I am? It's hard. It's a daily practice. It's a minute by minute, moment by moment daily practice. It's not just a one size fits all. I believe it should be for everybody. I believe that everyone should embrace the philosophies of yoga because, if you really embrace compassion for all living creatures, then war ends, right? There's no more war. There's no more violence. There's no more, murder. There's no more brutality. There's no everything. Just if the world embraced that principle alone, the world changes in an instant. But as we see what's happening in the world, we see, those guys versus this guys, and they're wrong and we're right. This again, ego. It's the clash of ego. When you see that happening, then there won't be peace. One of my favorite things that I don't have it, but at the Dharma Yoga Center in New York, Dharma came up with this brilliant phrase, and it's this. It's no yoga, right? N-O, the word no yoga, no peace. But then the second line says, no yoga, K-N-O-W, no yoga, no peace.
Mm,
That says it all. Like, that's it. If
right.
you just embrace that alone, you're good. Like that's truly sums it up, right?
No, it really does. That's really great to know that, what yoga embraces that kind of philosophy, especially about compassion. It says a lot about, the world and how there could be true change by embracing, the philosophies that have been around longer than governments
Yes.
have been around.
Exactly. And getting back to awaken warrior, so awaken is that part, is the awakening. It's knowing the truth. It's knowing all these principles that we just spoke about for the last few minutes. And then warrior is not what people think, because that's what I struggled with too, is when we started to study yoga philosophy, there's a book called the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is set around a war that's taking place. And it's a war between this group of people and that group of people. And the teacher, the main character, his name is Arjuna. Arjuna is like this fierce warrior, this ferocious archer, and he decides to have Krishna. And many people may have heard the word Krishna, especially the Bhakti yogis that are known as the Hari Krishnas. Krishna is chosen by Arjuna to be the driver of his chariot. So Arjuna says, Krishna, take me to the front of the battlefield. I want to see who my enemies are. So Arjuna gets driven by Krishna to the front of the battlefield, and he sees that across the battlefield are some of his teachers, some of his family members, right? They've chosen the dark side, so to speak. They've chosen the opposition, the enemy side. And Arjuna drops his bow, which for a warrior, that's like the ultimate no-no. Like you don't drop your weapon. Like you're a warrior, you go through and through, and he drops his bow and he just almost gives up. And then that's where the story begins. And then the teachings and philosophies of Krishna begin to get shared with Arjuna. And at first when I heard it's like, we're in a yoga teacher training. Why are we talking about war? Why are we talking about, murder and battles and killing? And I was like, this doesn't make sense. It was a story, just like the Bible has these stories with lessons. It was a story to teach us lessons, and many of the lessons are incredible. Just it's like karma, and dharma, and karma is cause and effect, right? For the most simplest understanding from for most people who may not believe in the spiritual teachings of karma. Karma is cause and effect, an action and a reaction. The spiritual teaching is that we are creating this energy that will then affect our life and that will can carry off into the next life as well. So we have to do good in this life to then have a better life in the next life. And that's a philosophy some people can get behind, some people can't, and it's not that's fine. That's up to them. But everyone could understand cause and effect. Like that's just a scientific law. So that's one thing. And then Dharma is finding your purpose. And in this story, Arjuna's purpose was that he was a warrior. He's there to fight. He's there to win this battle. He has to overcome evil. And for us, the lesson could be us overcoming our fears, right? Our fears could be our enemies. Fear, worry, doubt, frustration, all these negative emotions, those could be our enemies. So we have to overcome those. So that's us tapping into our inner warrior. And in my classes, I say that. I say, okay, now we're going to do the warrior sequence. There's a series of warrior poses, warrior one, warrior two, reverse warrior, warrior, humble warrior, warrior three. I said, but I always start that section by saying, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to listen to the words of the warrior. The warrior is not someone who doesn't feel fear, right? They're not fearless. A warrior might experience fear, but moves forward in spite of fear. And that's having true courage and that's being truly brave. And I tell my students, think of something in your life that you're struggling with, a challenge, an obstacle, maybe a goal or a vision, a dream for yourself, and tap into your inner warrior and face this fear, right? Face whatever's stopping you. Because most of us don't pursue our dreams because of fear. I was scared to jump up the pole at the seminar. I was scared to walk into the film school and ask how much do they charge because I know it's gonna be a lot of money. But thank God I did because I found out that they offered a scholarship and I applied and I got it. Had I let fear stop me and not make that phone call and showed up to that school and not had that conversation with the person who handles the admissions, I wouldn't have known that they offered a scholarship and I could apply for it, right? So we have to really overcome fear. And that's something that's big from Tony Robbins. He says fear has many definitions, right? The most common one is is forget everything and run, FEAR, forget everything and run. However, if we flip it and we turn it to face everything and rise, that's how we could overcome our fear, right? But to face it and rise above it, rise up to the occasion, and that's how we can really overcome our fears. So that was the mindset of warrior, is to face your fears, to overcome your fears, as opposed to being a victim of your fears and being paralyzed and not going for your dreams or your goals or whatever you want to do in your life.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I understand that fear can be very paralyzing
Yes.
to most. How you respond to it really
Yeah.
really can uh, present you with an outcome that
Yes.
you either align with or you don't.
Exactly.
That's really great that, yoga and martial arts
Yeah.
and you know what, and film school also teach that as
Yeah.
well, right? Pretty much anything, teaches you to get out of your comfort zone.
You have to. Making a movie, I tell you, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Making a movie, and I tell my girlfriend many times, Brianna, I tell her, many directors have said this. It's not just me. Many directors say that making a movie is like being in war. Because war, and she was like, why do you say that? That's horrible. I said, no, no, not war against like fighting with the cast and the crew. It's a war against time. It's a war against money sometimes because most movies never have enough money. Even the big Hollywood multi-million, $100 million, $2 million, 200 budgets don't have enough money. Every director says the same thing. We don't have enough money. A $300 million budget, you have a $300,000 budget. There's not enough money for either for some reason. This is bizarre, right? So there's a war against money, a war against time, because usually, there's not enough time. We have a tight schedule. We have to shoot this movie. My recent film, we shot it in 16 days, which is insane to shoot a 2 hour and 8 minute movie in 16 days. It was a war against time for sure, and we needed more money as we went along, is what we discovered. So it's it. But embracing, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, as I shared with you, as Arjuna finding his purpose. I found that this is my purpose. My purpose. I was on the set of my first short film when I was at the New York Film Academy making that 10-minute short film. And I remember the crew was setting up the lights and the actors are getting ready, and I'm there holding the camera because I was the director of photography as well. And I'm holding the camera, and there was this aha moment, and I never felt this ever, and I never felt it since then. There was this moment that said, this is what you have to do for the rest of your life. Like it was a clear as a bell. I was 22 years old, clear as a bell. Like this is what you have to do with the rest of your life. And I was like, wow, like I've never had this clarity ever in my life. So it's that, and just really again listening to intuition and really being called to your purpose. And yoga again, we call it Dharma. Your Dharma is your life purpose.
I love hearing all of it. And yeah, it's amazing. I love to hear more about your projects that you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, more about your movie.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. So the most recent one that I just did, I say just, but we shot it in December of 2023, but we screened it for the very first time publicly December of 2024. So it took me quite some time. Even though we shot it in 16 days, it still took me over a year and a half to edit it, to find sound designer and a mixer, to find a composer, to find a visual effects artist, and for the whole post-production side, I didn't have those guys. And luckily, I know how to edit, so I actually edited it on my own. But it took me a long time to find those other components. So anyway, that's the most recent project, and that project is called De La Cruz, and it's named after the main character. Her name is Yoli De La Cruz, and she's a young girl who just is done with school and is ready for summer vacation with her best friends. She has two best friends, two very very fun, passionate, wild girls. And one of them, their goals like, oh, we're gonna get you a boyfriend finally. We're gonna get you lose your virginity finally. That's her goal is to help Yoli lose her virginity because Yoli's a goody two shoes girl. She lives at home with her family. She goes to church. And she wants to meet in this boy who seems to be Prince Charles. He has money. He's very charming, charismatic, good looking, but he's a real a-hole for lack of better words.
Mm.
And he tries to take advantage of her, and she fortunately gets away. He tries to sexually assault her, but she gets away. He doesn't succeed, but she wants justice. She feels like this is wrong. He shouldn't get away with this, and she tries to report him to the police, only to discover that his father is the police captain. So this is a pattern, and the father helps him sweep it under the rug, and the father keeps telling him like, this is the last time I'm bailing you out, but he keeps doing it. So Yoli realizes I'm not going to get the justice that I want. So her best friend, her other best friend, says, I think it's time I introduce you to my cousin. And then sure enough, she meets her cousin, and the cousin is a former MMA fighter. He was a hitman. So he trains her. He trains her for 6 months. And then sure enough, at the end, she knocks on the guy's door and then gets her justice her own way at the end.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, definitely want to see that, right? Yeah, where can people see it?
Right now, we're doing the festival circuit. So, like, we screened in Vegas, we screened here in California. We played at the Chinese Theater, which is amazing. It was it's the historic. It's the most famous movie theater on planet Earth. It's almost 100 years old. It might have made it 100 years old now. And we played there, and it was incredible to see the Walk of Fame, the handprints and the footprints in the concrete, on the sidewalk over there. And then we played there, and that was amazing because we actually had our some of our cast members, the lead actress and a couple other cast members flew in from Mexico. We shot it in Mexico, by the way, just because of the cost. The cost of shooting in LA and New York was just so high. And as much as I want to support, US films and productions, it just was not going to be feasible. It was like it's going to be astronomical. I would need millions of dollars. So I was on vacation during COVID, and a light bulb moment. I was like, you know what? I think Mexico is a place to shoot it because we were in Mexico on vacation with my girlfriend and her sister, and that's where it all began. And for 3 years, I traveled from LA to now Mexico instead of New York, LA to Mexico for 3 years, finding the right city, the right crew, the right cast, holding auditions, table reads, just starting the process. Even though I had no money, I just had a lot of faith. I was like, I'm just gonna get the ball rolling, and things will. And I believe, it's a wonderful, wonderful quote that I think I truly live my life by Martin Luther King. He says, "You don't have to see the whole staircase; just take the first step." So for me, taking that first step and getting on a plane and going to Mexico, and then taking the next step and finding a local crew and producers and holding auditions, just getting the ball rolling created this momentum. Next thing you know, it took us 3 years, but finally we were able to get an investor, and then we were ready. 3 years of preparation met the opportunity. Once the investor came on board, we were ready to go, and then we shot the movie in 16 days. And that film right now, as I said, it's in the festival circuit right now. So we're playing in festivals all around. We did Vegas, we did LA, we won in Chile, we won in Venezuela, we won in Vermont, which was amazing because that festival was probably one of the most surprising festivals, the one in Vermont, because it was a Christian film festival. And my film is very dark. We're dealing with sexual abuse, we're dealing with guys who were like, former hitmen, badass guys, and we won a Christian film festival. And I was like, did they watch my movie? Like, even though it's called De La Cruz and there's a lot of references to church in the opening scene, she's walking to church and her family is encouraging her mom, you got to go to church on Sunday. So it's very heavily influenced by my Catholic and Christian upbringing, but it's a dark movie. And then we actually won for Best Actress with the leading actress. Her name is Sophia Diaz. She won her, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. Now I understand because she's brilliant. She won already 4 awards for Best Actress in different film festivals around the world. She's really, really crushing it. So we're doing the first festival circuit now. We're playing in Italy at the end of June. I'm so excited about that. It's been a dream to go to Italy for years, and we're finally going. And we already won. They already told us that we won 4 awards in Italy. So right now we won a total of 29 awards so far. 29. Incredible. But I mean, and from everything from like best directing, acting, editing, cinematography, fight choreography, art direction, sound design, composing, the music, pretty much almost every category you could possibly win in, we've won an award somewhere in a festival. Yeah, 29 awards so far. But we do have a company that's handling our distribution, and they're going to start taking the project to different platforms. This is really amazing company called Buffalo 8, and they're going to pitch the movie to the platforms and get it out there. So later this year, it will be out. We don't know which platform yet. They have to present it, and hopefully it'll be one of the bigger ones, and everyone can watch it around the world. But right now, it's in the festival circuit.
Wow, what a journey. 29 awards and counting.
Yeah, they counting. I got it. 'Cause I got a bunch of other festivals I submitted to. We're still waiting to hear back from those guys. But yeah, it's been great. It's so reassuring and refreshing because as a filmmaker, I wrote the script as well. It's like I have it in my head, and then to put it on paper, that alone takes a tremendous amount of effort. And then, like I said, go to another country and then try to look for locations and crew and cast, that takes a tremendous amount of effort to raise money. Like every step, every phase of this project has taken so much out of me, like just so much it demanded from me, and it's really a low budget film according to Hollywood standards, but the production value, the quality looks amazing. I'm really happy with all the performances and the cinematography, but it just takes a lot. So yeah, it's really nice to see that we're winning awards. It's like, okay, I think it's good. My mom thinks it's good. But again, to win in these festivals, particularly in other countries, when you got a film that's heavily Mexican, we shot it in Mexico and all the cast is Mexican. I'm the only one from the US. Like the entire cast and crew was Mexican and only 2 from Venezuela and 1 from Colombia, but everyone else was Mexican. So we just embraced the Mexican culture, went all in with it, so it's definitely a Mexican film. So to win in Vermont in a Christian film festival, to win in to get 4 awards in Italy, to win in, all these, we won 9 awards in France, in Paris. We won 9 awards. So like for have it to be received in other parts of the world that's not Mexican or Latino dominated, it's other cultures. It's really, really great because I think the story is universal. Any woman or even a man, and anyone who knows someone who's been sexually assaulted or knows someone who has been a victim, and at the end she becomes a warrior, to go from victim to warrior. That's a story everyone can relate to, right? You don't have to be Mexican or any other nationality. Like everyone can understand like her struggle of like she wants justice, and the only way she can get justice is by going after the guy herself. We call it street justice.
Street justice, yes.
Yeah,
And I know
yeah.
you mentioned also that, doing all of this and the preparation and, just doing the whole process of creating this film took a lot out of you. In those moments where you needed to ground, to center, what did that look like? How was your
Yeah.
self-care during that time?
Oh my God. Thank God for yoga. That's all I gotta say. If it wasn't for yoga, I would have strangled a couple people on stage. Because it's funny because, you go into this with the best intentions, and I think everyone has the best intentions. But then during the journey, people shift, people change, people promise one thing and then don't deliver what they promise. We had that with one of the quote unquote producers in Mexico, who just promised the stars and the moon and didn't deliver the stars and the moon, and then left me like, okay, now I got to figure it out. We had another producer who was what I suspect, and many of us would agree, was taking money from the production. So to face this ugliness from these individuals while I'm trying to make a story that's so empowering, for women. And again, everyone was on the same page in the beginning. All of a sudden now their personalities start to really show, their true colors start to show. I had to resort to prayer. I had to turn within. We were doing yoga with the cast before we started shooting for about 2 weeks. We had a space, and we just invite the cast and crew. Hey guys, I'm gonna do a yoga class, tonight, and many of them would come, and it was a great way to bond. It was such a wonderful way for them to like connect with each other because we would do like partner yoga where I have to match up with each other and help them stretch each other out, which we got from yoga and from martial arts too. And it was great. They got a chance to bond. I got a chance to really connect with them. They got a chance to see me as a teacher, as a leader, to really work that dynamic, as I said, with the group dynamic of a classroom. So it was amazing. So I'm very fortunate that we had that preparation to use yoga. And then again, through a lot of prayer, meditation, grounding myself, breathing, always remembering like to just get to the finish line. It's like a marathon. I never run a marathon, but I'm sure it's like a marathon of like get to the finish line. No matter what, you got to cross that finish line. And that was my goal. Like when we were on set, is like just get to the end, like finish shooting the movie. And then once that phase was complete, and I was like, okay, finish editing the movie. And that took 2 months. It took me 2 months to edit a 16-day shoot because we shot with multiple cameras. We shot with two and sometimes three cameras. So I had tons and tons of footage I had to go through on my own. So that took me 2 months to edit. And then from there, I had to find the rest of my post-production team, which I did. Carlos, Omar, and then Pipo, his name is. So one was in Puerto Rico. His name is Omar. Omar Cruz Cabrera is our composer. Brilliant composer. He did an amazing soundtrack for us. And then Pipo is his nickname. He's in Guadalajara, Mexico. He did our visual effects. He did our color correction. And then Carlos Bueno is here in LA. He did our sound mix and our sound design. So those three guys, I refer to them as my three kings because I was finally able to pay them on Three Kings Day, which if you're familiar with the Latino culture, Dia de los Reyes, I was able to pay him on those days. So I call them my three kings. Yeah.
That's great. And that's a really great practice too, to integrate yoga into your other projects as
Yes.
a form of team building and kind of setting the pace and just allowing that collaboration to exist. That's a wonderful way to incorporate yoga and other holistic practices.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. It was so, I'm telling you, I'm so grateful. I hadn't done a feature film. I've done short films and commercials as a yogi, where I was already now a yoga teacher. I had done that, but I never done a feature film now having been a yoga teacher and a yoga a trainer. And it really, really made a difference. Like I really had to, really use my yoga philosophy. Even though I wasn't doing physical poses during those 16 days, I was applying the yoga principles, And there were times, honestly, where I snapped and had to throw somebody off the set because they were very disrespectful and rude to one of the actresses. So I kicked them off the set, and that was the martial arts side of me. So I think that having that balance of like yin and yang, okay, I could be peaceful and we could have a great time, but if you cross the line and you're disrespecting somebody on my set, your ass is out. I'm not going to tolerate that. And he was being disrespectful to a woman, and I was like, no, this doesn't fly. I don't know if that's part of the culture here, like the machismo, but I draw the line there, and I threw him off the set. He apologized afterwards, and he continued on with us. But it just had to set a boundary. You had to set a really clear boundary. We can't be doing a movie about female empowerment and a woman standing up for herself, and then have a guy disrespect a woman on my set. Like that. No, that's not congruent. That's not happening. So we had to deal with that. But yeah, it's a learning experience. It's a wonderful journey. But this movie, it's called De La Cruz, as I said, is part of a trilogy. So part two and part three, we follow the journey of Yoli into the rest of the stories, and I'm really excited because now that we're done with part one, our distribution company pitching it, and we have the movie winning festivals. Now my focus is shifting now to part two. So the script is already written. I actually wrote these scripts backwards. I wrote part three in 1999, but it was going to be a one-off. Like there was no intention of series and sequels and prequels, but that part three now, and what is known as, it was going to cost millions of dollars. And I just got out of film school. I was like, I don't know how to raise millions of dollars. So I put it aside and I did short films and commercials. And then 2019, I was like, you know what? I got to do this story. I can't just let this die. So I said, let me write a prequel to that story, and then I'll make it smaller and it won't require as much money. And I'll even consider shooting in another country. So that's when I actually went to Colombia. I was considering Puerto Rico, where I'm from, and it wasn't going to happen, there because different reasons. Money, the main reason, was going to be so expensive. And then when I was in Mexico for vacation during COVID, that's when I decided, okay, Mexico is where it's at. But then even then, it was taking a long time to get that project going because of the strike that happened and all COVID happened. I was like, oh my God, am I ever going to make these movies? So then I said, you know what? I'm gonna write a prequel to the prequel, and that's known as now Part One, which is De La Cruz. And then I was able to keep that budget pretty small, and then keep that story contained so that I can get the ball rolling. So now in Part Two, it's a much bigger story. That's called Muertos, and then Part Three, which was the first script I wrote, is called Butterfly in the Fire. So we're just following their evolution and the journey of Yoli De La Cruz in the whole trilogy. But it all started back in New York.
That's incredible. I'm excited to watch it when it does become available for us to watch. I will definitely be there for sure. And
Awesome.
what I did want to mention to you, because I know we're talking about all the screenings and all the awards, how did you feel? What was your first, like, describe the moment where you were there in the movie theater watching your movie for the first time?
Thank you for asking. That was probably one of the best feelings of my life, honestly, because a couple reasons. One is like my girlfriend was with me the whole journey, Brianna. She was, we've been together 7 years, so she was there from me talking about this, for years, to then me writing De La Cruz. I wrote that script in 7 days, which is a miracle. I believe I fully channeled that script. I had known this character for so many years, since 1999. I knew her. I knew who she was. I felt her essence, her spirit. So I was able to like just write a De La Cruz Part One in 7 days. So she was with me during this whole process, 3 years of going to Mexico, going to Colombia, and she was seeing me the battle of like making a movie, raising money, being on set, fighting with the producers, throwing crew people off the set, actors quitting at the last minute, when they committed to a role and signed a contract, and then dropping out like, I don't want to do the movie anymore. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this is not professional. So she's seeing all that stuff, the editing process. I mean, just the hell I was going through. And she would say to me, do this. Like you just seem so angry and bitter and miserable. I mean, no, 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 no. I know it seems that way, but believe me, when the movie's on the big screen and you see the finished product, you'll understand. And sure enough, when we screened it for the first time at the Regal Theater, part of the Culver City Film Festival, and we were in the theater in downtown LA, and it's on the big screen, and the music and the sound, the audience, we got a packed house. And I turned to her at the end, I said, now do you understand? She's like, yeah, I get it. And that was great. That moment was amazing. Then the second great moment was then, my mom was there. She flew in from New York. She's been incredibly supportive, as I said, even when I wanted to be an actor. She flew into LA, and she was there, and I brought her up at the end, and hopefully I don't tear up. I brought her up at the end to acknowledge her, and she's just crying, she couldn't even talk. And she was like, I'm so proud of you, and that meant the world, because she was there for the journey even before, when I was wanting to be an actor, going to auditions, so she was there when I was 8 years old, starting this journey. Here I am now, in California, and finally seeing the movie on the big screen. The hardships, the struggles, the pain, the sacrifices. My son was at that screening as well. He's 11 years old, so he was covering his eyes and covering his ears for some parts, some scenes. But for him to see his dad's work on, we go to movie theater all the time. Him and I, we go to, we're constantly seeing the latest kid movies that he can watch. This is his first like R-rated movie that he saw. Was my movie. I don't know if that was a good example or not, but he enjoyed it. He did enjoy it. But being able to share that moment with my son, like, this is my work. This is why I missed Christmas. This is why I wasn't here for Thanksgiving. He could really see, the effort that went into it. So it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. I highly recommend it. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, to be honest with you. But it's freaking hard, man.
Well, it sounds rewarding, and what a beautiful thing to have family and friends and the support, and
Oh, that's yes.
yeah, makes it all worth it for sure.
For sure, for sure. I'm very grateful. I'm so happy for the support system I had. There was this little card game that I played with my girlfriend and some friends, and you just kind of ask like these really deep questions. And one of the questions was like, who's your support system? Who are your cheerleaders? And of course, my mom, as I said, my girlfriend, as I said, my dad, my son's mom, who was very supportive. She was with me in the first half of the journey as an actress, as a writer, a director as well. So we worked together. My best friend, his name is Christo. also my writing teacher, Eddie Pomerantz, my producer, Ed Martin. I have a huge support system of people who are like my close inner circle that I run my scripts by, my ideas by. I show them the first cuts of my movie. I get their opinion, their takes on it. These are people who I've known all my life, and some of them, more than 20 years. So I've always run my material by them. I think it's so important to have that support system. Even if it's just one person. I'm fortunate that I have five, six, seven, eight, or whatever it is. But even if you just have one person in your corner, I think every coach for a fighter in the ring, or a coach for a team on the field, that coach is invaluable, because a coach gets you through those hard times, when you feel like giving up in the ring, or the coach is seeing how to defeat your opponent, when you're in the ring, you don't see it, but they can see it from the outside, so that's so invaluable. And I think that's why success coaches and life coaches have become a huge industry, because we all need that. We all need it. Athletes have it, right? Professional athletes have it. Many people have mentors and teachers, and in yoga, you gurus, but the average person doesn't have that. So I think that's why I think this whole coaching industry has exploded, because I think people are realizing life is hard. I need a coach.
Yes, it's very important. And I'm glad that, coaching and being supportive of people's dreams is very important for sure.
Yeah,
And I'm glad that that's readily available to everybody. And it's all about just finding the right coach, whoever resonates, and you start doing the work. It's
definitely.
really rewarding for sure. Michael, questions for you. Yes. What is your favorite movie?
Oh, wow. Hands down, I think my all-time favorite, I have many favorite movies. I think my all-time favorite movie is The Godfather. And I just recently saw that Steven Spielberg said the same thing. So I think I'm right in this answer. The Godfather is probably the best movie ever made, And I think that what I love about that movie, and there's so many synchronicities. I'm a huge believer in synchronicities, which I think I shared with you at the event that I spoke at, where I met you. Synchronicities, I look for them, and in yoga, we believe that when you're aligned, when you're on your purpose, when you're on your track, when you're on your path, you'll see the synchronicities. It might be a song on the radio, it might be a tattoo. For me, because my movie, the main actress, the character, her nickname is Butterfly. Her mother calls her Butterfly, and the last movie is called Butterfly in the Fire. Whenever I see a butterfly tattoo, which I see on almost on a daily basis, right? There's always some woman who has a butterfly tattoo. It's a reminder for me, or because of my movie, the second one is called Muertos, and the logo for that one is a skull. So many times I'll see a skull, even like bikers, on a highway have a skull, on the leather jacket, In part one, it's a wolf, which is why I wear this hat here, so I'll see a husky in the street, that looks like a wolf. I actually had a husky and inspired, the character as well. So I look for those signs, when I get them, for me, it's like, okay, you're on the right path. And I'm always mindful of like, what am I thinking, or what am I debating in the moment when I see the sign? Because sometimes I'll be thinking, oh, am I on the right path? Is it worth it? Am I ever going to get this thing done? Sure enough, I'll see a butterfly. I've literally had. I was in Costa Rica, and I was having one of those, crossroad moments where I was hired to direct a movie, and the script needed a lot of work, and the writer was not, he was not budging. He was like, oh, no, that's it. And I was like, oh, man, this script needs work. Like it really needs work. And I don't mind. I'm a writer, and I don't even want the credit. I just need to make it better because you're gonna have me direct it. I want to enhance it. And he was refusing. So I was really struggling, but we got sent to Costa Rica, which is not a bad place to be sent to, because he was considering shooting there. And we're looking for locations. And on the first or second night of being there, I got food poisoning. And I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I'm in Costa Rica at this beautiful hotel. We're right across the street from the beach. Like, I'm laying in bed for the entire day, sick. I won't give you the gory details, but just gross. And I'm like, oh, so finally at nighttime, I'm like, I gotta get out of bed. Like, I gotta get some fresh air. So I go across the street, the restaurant or the hotel, and then right on the beach. I took a walk over to the beach, and I'm just contemplating life. It's like, God, please, God, what's going on? And I wrote the name of my movie, De La Cruz. This is before I made it. I wrote the name of the movie in the sand, and I'm praying. I'm like, God, please, like, this is the movie I want to make. Please, 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 God, help me make this movie. Like, why am I here making this other guy's movie when I know my movie is amazing? It's not from an egotistical place. It's just saw both scripts, And I swear to God, a butterfly flies at nighttime in Costa Rica. The butterfly flies across the name of my movie. And I'm like, so I grab my phone, I'm recording it. And then the butterfly lands on my shoulder at nighttime in Costa Rica. I'm like, oh my God. All right, God, I got the sign. I surrender. I surrender. And sure enough, within I think 2 months, 2 or 3 months, we got the investor to put the money in and then we were off to the races. So again, I'm a big believer in signs, coincidences. So in The Godfather, and it's a long way to go. I had to tell you that story. It's one of my favorite stories. And The Godfather, first of all, the main character's name is Michael, right? Michael Corleone. I was like, that's a nice coincidence. And then the opening scene at the party, the opening scene is at a wedding. The Godfather's daughter is getting married, and in that one scene, his son Sonny is very feisty, and there's like people they think it's reporters or people outside paparazzi taking photos of the cars, but it turns out it's FBI agents. So Sonny goes outside to the parking lot and he just is just pissy and he grabs somebody's camera and throws it on the ground. And he's just being a total badass. But one of the cars in the parking lot, the license plate says BX, which is if you're from the Bronx, we always say BX. So the license plate says BX 1213. That's my birthday. I was born December 13th. So I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's my birthday. I'm from the Bronx. The guy's name is Michael, right? And so that always spoke to me, first of all. And then the movie's amazing, right? But then the making of the movie, once I started to really learn about Francis Ford Coppola and everything that he went through to make the movie and the fights that he endured, and like he was fighting to get Al Pacino, who at the time was unknown. No one knew who Al Pacino was. The producer didn't want Al Pacino in. He wanted somebody else who was more famous. And Francis Ford Coppola fought for Al Pacino to get him. He's like, no, this is my guy. He's Michael Corleone. And sure enough, he won that fight. And then Al Pacino got in. And then he fought for Marlon Brando. No one wanted Marlon Brando because he was a very controversial actor. He would show up late. He would not memorize his lines. He had a bad reputation, but he was a brilliant actor. And Francis Ford Coppola fought for Marlon Brando. So he was fighting the entire journey. There's a great many books about him making The Godfather, and I read most of them. And you could see like he had such a clear vision that he was like, no, it has to be this way. And I really embraced that spirit of Francis Ford Coppola. I was like, okay, if you want to make a great movie, you got to stick to your guns. Yes, it's a collaborative experience for sure. And I welcome ideas from my actors, my actresses, my crew for sure. But if it doesn't contribute to the vision, I'm not embracing those ideas. I have to be able to say no, and people have to respect that as a director, right? Especially as a writer, director, producer, they have to. So that's something that I really live by. So I think Francis Ford Coppola has had a huge impact on my life as a filmmaker because of the making of The Godfather. And the movie went on to win many Academy Awards. It's one of the greatest films of all time, and the trilogy of The Godfather is brilliant. So I think my trilogy is like in a way a homage to the Godfather trilogy. And actually, in the opening scene in De La Cruz, the opening scene of The Godfather, the line is "I believe in America," right? That's the first line of The Godfather. It's a close-up shot. The camera's pulling away from the actor's face, and that's how he starts the movie. And the first scene of actual scene in my movie, the character says "I believe" as well. But he's talking about La Santa Muerte because we deal with the Mexican culture, La Santa Muerte, and she has a big part in the movie. So yeah, it's my little homage to The Godfather and acknowledging the inspiration that it gave to me. So that's one of my all-time favorite movies. Another one is The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, I think is a brilliant movie. Absolutely loved it. It had a huge impact on me. It's a movie that I'm like really speaks to me because I believe in spirituality. I believe in the afterlife. I believe in ghosts. And to have a movie about ghosts and communicating with a little boy. And I was very intuitive as a child. I used to see things. My grandmother taught me how to pray and light candles and just connect with my guardians and things like that. I was very very raised very spiritual by my mom. My mom to this day, is constantly prayer, lighting candles, going to church, So we have a very strong faith in my family. And then the Sixth Sense really spoke to that because it's a little boy who can see, the famous line, "I see dead people." That's another one of my favorites. I have many favorites. I could be here for another 3 hours talking about favorite movies, but those are the two that come to my mind off the top of my head. And Enter the Dragon, because Enter the Dragon is the one that really sparked me to wanted to become a martial artist. Just seeing Bruce Lee, his essence, his soul on that screen, it was just so powerful. He's definitely a huge inspiration for me as a martial artist and then also as a filmmaker. And that's why, most of my movies, of course, most movies today, if there's a fight scene, it's a martial art scene, right? Like it used to be like old school brawling, and now it's like full out flips and spinning kicks. And now it's like, it's complete, like martial art is the fight style of cinema, hands down. So in all my movies, I incorporate martial arts. In De La Cruz, she studies MMA, mixed martial arts, and then she goes and gets her revenge. So yeah, I always incorporate martial arts in terms of my movies.
That's great. Yes. I love how you incorporate a lot of your growing up, your aspects. A little part of you is always in something that
Yeah,
you create.
yeah,
What do you out of the I know you mentioned the trilogy, which that's very exciting.
yeah,
Do you have any other ideas in the future for other
yeah.
type of movies
Oh,
or
for sure.
genres?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or written. I've written many scripts, but I like the genre of supernatural. I like the genre of crime. When I was trying to figure out my life path, I went to John Jay College in New York, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I was thinking I was going to get into law. I went to Bayside High School to study law. I went to John Jay College to study law, specifically to be a forensic psychologist. And then I was like, okay, I don't want to study criminal minds. I don't want to get into that field as a profession, but I am fascinated by it as a storyteller. So then I embrace the crime world. That's why I love The Godfather and many other crime movies as a genre. So, but I also like the spiritual side. So I like to combine organized crime with the spiritual aspect. So that's why most of my movies, have a church. Almost every film I've done has a church in it, and has some type of a crime figure. Like I said, a hitman, a crime boss, a racketeer. I did another short film called Racket, and the guy was a racketeer. And yeah. So I always incorporate organized crime and spirituality into my films in some way, shape, or form.
That's incredible, Michael. Thank you. Thank you for all this. And thank you for this conversation. Be very enlightening and very inspirational, doing what it is
Right.
that you love and letting that be your light and all the darkness. That's amazing. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for that. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you wanted to share with the audience before?
Sure, sure. I would say in all this, just like I said, pay attention to signs, have some form of a spiritual practice, whether it be church, the Bible, something, just something. During dark times, we need spiritual guidance. We need to have something to lean on and someone to go to get some type of a spiritual guidance. I've also studied the Kabbalah, and one of my favorite philosophies of the Kabbalah, they teach us that even a tiny little candle, you take a tiny little candle, little those little tea light candles, and in a dark room, that little tiny little candle can light up the room. And it's a metaphor for us that, during our times of darkness, no matter how dark it is, a tiny little bit of faith, could be a small little ounce of faith, can illuminate our dark times. And that's I'm like, oh my God, that's such a brilliant way to teach these lessons in the most simplest way. And in yoga, as you know, namaste, we say the light within me sees the light within you. The divine in me sees the divine in you. So I think that truth, no matter what religion, culture, whether it be Kabbalah, which is more of a Jewish spirituality teachings, or yoga, which is more Indian teachings, that whole essence about light shining and sharing, it's similar. So I will always tell people to find some form of spirituality. Of course, it's going to be for me yoga because that's where I found my truth and my myself. But whatever it is for people, and then also to pay attention to signs and coincidences, and to take, as Tony Robbins says, massive action. To make a decision and take massive action. I was clear that no matter what, I was going to go to Mexico and shoot my movie. And I said, even if I got to shoot it on my iPhone, I'm going to shoot this movie. And luckily, I didn't have to shoot on my iPhone. I was able to get other cameras. But it's just that total all-in commitment. I said it was like do or die. I made a promise to myself. It was New Year's Eve, December 2022, New Year's Eve, and I had just seen this movie called The Whale. And it moved me so much, the whale. It moved me so much. And I went home that night and I was like, I've got to change my life. Like, I've got to do something. I got to make this movie. I can't wait anymore. Like, I've been talking about it for years, since I wrote the script in 1999. And here it is, 22, and I still hadn't made the movie. So I said, I'm going to make this movie with the intention that if I don't make the movie, I'm going to give myself 1 year. If I don't make the movie within this 1 year, game over. I'm gonna treat it as if I die. Like at the end of the year, I die. And if I don't make this movie, I'm dead, and the movie doesn't get created, and that's it. And I kept that in the back of my mind, and moved with that conviction. And sure enough, December 30th of 2023, almost a year exact, we wrapped the movie to the last minute. I'm a horrible procrastinator, I guess. But with 1 day to spare, I finished the movie. And so I would say for people to really You don't have to play on that level of my. I'm very, intense. You don't have to play with life or death stakes. Don't sit around talking. I got sick of hearing myself talk about making this movie, and I think that was the thing. I was like, I'm tired of talking about it. It's time to just go after it. So I would say that to people watching this, is just go after your dreams, wholeheartedly, with 100% faith and conviction. You don't have to take the see the whole staircase, take the first step, as Martin Luther King says, and just to really go for it, and look along the people who come on your path. It's how I met you through Michelle, and I met Michelle through my best friend Lisa, who I met from karate. So it just goes to show, like, me doing karate, X amount of years ago, when I was 16 years old, at that particular school, is how I met Lisa. And then Lisa introduced me to Michelle, her sister, and then years later, I meet Michelle. I already know her, but I met you through her, and here we are sharing this conversation. So, like, look at the people in your life. And Michelle actually calls them earth angels, which I think is a brilliant way. And I for sure believe that she's an earth angel. And she introduced me to someone named Dennis Bonilla. He's an earth angel. My investors for my movie, Craig Cohen and Gio, all these guys are earth angels. My girlfriend, Brianna, my son, the people who really impact you, who really shape you and change your life. I believe that those are earth angels, and we have to really embrace them and acknowledge.
Yes, that's wonderful. And that's a wonderful send off also.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for all of that. And for anyone out there watching right now who's interested in getting into the
Yeah,
film industry or
yeah,
yoga or martial
sure.
arts, what piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, yeah, I would say, as far as martial arts, like, fine, there's so many different types of martial arts, right? There's Kung Fu, there's MMA, which has become so popular right now. There's karate, there's so many different, even in boxing, to find what speaks to you. For me, it was karate at the time. I think MMA is now the dominant style. Everyone's going towards MMA and jiu-jitsu specifically. But for people, just see what resonates with you. And because there's gonna be different styles, different approaches, different philosophies, for people to go to what speaks to them in terms of the martial arts. In terms of yoga, if people want to do yoga with me, I teach here in California, but we have the training where we teach people how to be teachers. It's Awaken Warrior, as we said, Awaken Warrior Yoga Teacher Training. They can reach out to us through our website, or email or Instagram, as far as that. But yoga, same thing. Find a style that speaks to you, because there's so many different types of yoga. There's hot yoga, there's yin yoga, there's vinyasa, there's power yoga, right? So find a yoga that resonates with you. And I think that's just based on your personality. If you're a very intense person, you might want more like a vinyasa and power yoga. If you're a more chill and relaxed person, then you may want more restorative yoga or yin yoga, which is more relaxed and slower pace. So find what speaks to you. As far as film, we're always available if people want to reach out to me. We're always looking for crew. We're always looking for actors. We're always looking for investors. If any investors out there, please reach out to me. But with film as well, same thing. They can follow us on our Instagram. For this particular movie is Dela Cruz the movie on Instagram, and Dela Cruz the movie is the website. Cruzthemovie.com is a website. But it's just like, again, just pray, meditate, get clear on, like, what your calling is, what your purpose is, and then go at it 1,000%. Don't wait 20 plus years like I did.
Yes, words of wisdom. Thank you so much for that, Michael. Michael Baez, we're definitely tuned in to your success as a filmmaker, and
Right.
we're excited to see, all the wonderful creations that you get to create and co-create with others. Yeah, I'm
Thank
really
you.
looking forward to all of it, and thank you so much again for taking the time to be here. I look forward to, more collaborations, and we will definitely
Yes,
run into each other again.
absolutely. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Peace.
Yes, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure to leave all of the links below so everyone can follow Michael's journey on everything that he does. So, yes, the links will be below so everyone can check them out. Thank you, everyone. Peace.